I found some entrepreneurial books that kind of inspired me at around 14, 15. And I worked for a guy who owned 6 McDonald's franchises. And I got a chance to talk to him on several occasions about why he thought entrepreneurship was a great path to go down. I had an entrepreneurial mentor at a young age, and kind of, really just wanted to explore that journey. It felt right for me. I'm really lucky that was something that I kind of found that path early on.
Okay, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the One Shot Movement podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of entrepreneurs that are out there making it happen, pulling out the wisdom, the stories, the inspiration, the education of the people that are out in the field day to day making things happen. I'm super excited today to be with Daniel Priestley, which is an entrepreneur that I've been following for a very, very, very long time, because he is someone that's really out there making it happen. He's a best-selling author of 4 books. He's built and sold businesses all over the world. He's the founder of Dent, and he's going to share a little bit about their growth accelerator programs when he shares his story. And he has offices all around the world, including UK, Singapore, US, and Australia. And he's also very philanthropic, where he's out there raising money for good causes as well. So we're going to be talking to Daniel today about passion, purpose, business, growth, everything you can imagine that all entrepreneurs need to know. So welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate that amazing warm intro. That's lovely.
Look,
I feel like I need to kind of go get this superhero that you're talking about.
No, look, I mean, I have been following you for a long time, because, you are someone that is out in the field and got a great message, got a great following, and someone that's doing, everything in that entrepreneurial space. So let's just start with your story. Like, you live in the UK now, but I'd love the audience to hear a bit more about your background.
Yeah, so I guess you'd say very much an entrepreneurial background. I knew in my teenage years that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I found some entrepreneurial books that kind of inspired me at around 14, 15. And I worked for a guy who owned 6 McDonald's franchises, and I got a chance to talk to him on several occasions about why he thought entrepreneurship was a great path to go down. I had an entrepreneurial mentor at a young age, and kind of, really just wanted to explore that journey. It felt right for me. I'm really lucky that was something that I kind of found that path early on. And in my teenage years, I ran nightclub parties and made some great money in one night, which was each time we ran the parties. And then I was super lucky that at 19, I went and pitched myself into this entrepreneurial fast growth company as employee number 3, with a successful entrepreneur who was starting a new venture, pre-revenue, pre-marketing campaign, pre-launch. And I basically got to have this incredible opportunity where we started a business from scratch, literally, notepad, paper, and coming up with ideas and headlines and copy and, products, right through to within 2 years, we were up around 6 million of revenue, 60 people on the team. And because I was employee number 3, I really got to see what it was like to go through fast growth and to see the real numbers and the real kind of the reality of that journey. And then at about 2 years in, I went to my boss, John, at the time, and I said, hey, look, I've been right here from the beginning and we're doing really well. Can I get some shares in the company? And he said, if you want shares in the business, you got to go start your own business. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, I picked the wrong time to ask him, obviously. So at that moment, I got dreaming about maybe I should start my own business. So I did. I started my own company, and I stole most of the ideas that I'd learned in the last 2 years and applied them to my own startup. And basically, it was a fast growth startup. We went from 0 to 11 million in about 3 or 4 years. So it was a real roller coaster of just kind of accelerated growth. So that was my 20s, and I ended up around the age of 30 writing the book Key Person of Influence, moving to the UK. I launched an accelerator, and that accelerator has since grown onto all the major time zones, and We run that out of a Sydney office. You mentioned a few different offices. We actually have consolidated to Sydney, Toronto, and London as our main offices, and we focus on time zones rather than cities now. So we've doubled in the last few years. We've got a great business, a great team, and we get to be up to our elbows in interesting entrepreneurs all the time.
And I guess with the growth program, the growth accelerator program, is it all about education for entrepreneurs that are startups, or are they 6-figure and moving into 7-figure? Are they 7 figures going to 8 figures? What are you really out there educating?
So the overall mission of the business is to develop entrepreneurs that stand out, scale up, and make a positive impact in the world. The word dent comes from the Steve Jobs quote that an entrepreneur's job is to go make a dent in the universe and to put a dent in a big problem. And that's what we encourage entrepreneurs to do. We've mapped out an entrepreneurial journey for people, which is around starting up and getting proof of concept, and then building a small team and then getting some cut through in the marketplace, and then scaling up to a bigger team and bigger revenues. And we actually run 3 programs. One is called the Startup Accelerator, one's called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator, and one's called Better Every Quarter. And essentially it's about applying the business growth strategy that works dependent upon the size of the business and the stage of the business that you're in. So some of our clients are getting started with a new idea. Some of our clients are going from 6 to 7 figures, and some of our clients are already up to 8-figure revenue and looking at exiting.
And I guess with your key person of influence, you've written a book about it, and if you look into your bio a bit, that word comes out quite a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about key person of influence? What does that mean? And what are the key concepts around that?
One of the things that I noticed when I was growing businesses in my 20s was that every industry revolves around a very small number of people. So the real estate industry, there are certain key players who are at the epicenter of the industry, the software industry, the franchising space. Pretty much any industry or any space that you can think of, there are this small group of key people of influence who kind of each have their own little take on things, their own niche, and all the opportunities tends to revolve around them. So if anything, like if you imagine an industry being 10,000 people and there's like 15, 20, 30 people on the epicenter, anything that's exciting that's happening within the 10,000 people in the industry suddenly very rapidly makes its way to one of these 20 to 30 people. And the experience of being a key person of influence is you're just swamped with opportunities all the time, really good ones. And the experience of not being a key person of influence is you're always looking at terrible opportunities and on the hunt for an opportunity. So I kind of had this realization that unless you're a key person of influence, your full-time job is to get on the epicenter and become one. And as soon as you do, you do because you just have great things come out of the woodwork all the time.
And look, one of the things that I really like about you, you're a really powerful thought leader and got great ideas, you got good influence. If I was somebody, and I've been in business now for 20 years and had a good career in business, in franchising and that myself, but if I was just starting today and I come to someone like yourself and said, where do I start? What would your best advice be?
So the first thing we look at is what we call your mountain of value. And the mountain of value, if you imagine as an image in your mind, climbing to the top of a really great mountain, and as you stand there on the top, you can see everything on the horizon. You can see all the things around you, but you can't see the mountain that you're actually standing on. And that's an analogy that we use with most people, that they can see the silhouette of everyone else's mountain of value from a distance, but they completely overlook their own story, their own high points, their low points. They overlook the ideas, the methods, the case studies, the stories that they've experienced over the last 15, 20 years. So one of the first things we like to do is try and tune out from the ridiculous, procession of ongoing ideas that are being thrust at you on social media all the time, and start tuning into your mountain of value and get a better understanding of what is there inside the mountain of value. What is a good opportunity for you? What is it that you add to the table, add to the equation? What's your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your, the things that are your powerful stories you could be telling? So all of that is the kind of internal work of finding your mountain of value and kind of defining your mountain of value. And then we look at something that we call chaos. So chaos is the first four things that you have to get right when you're starting a business, which is having a powerful concept, having a good concept of what it is that you're going to do. So being able to explain what it is you're up to in the world and who, why that's a good idea. The next one is your audience. Who is it you're trying to get in front of? Who do you want who do you want the attention of? The next one is offer. So what would you offer them if you were in front of them that would make them feel like they wanted to do business with you? And then sales, which is how do you generate leads and convert those into sales at the beginning when you've got no background, no credibility, you're only just getting started. So those are the first four big challenges for getting started in business: chaos, mountain of value, then chaos. And that's what we start with most people in startup.
And and you touched on that. I guess, one of the things I always talk to people about is, you only have one shot at life. Go out there and give it your best shot, whatever that is for you. And I often talk about, passion and purpose, finding a why, finding something where you do it because you love it. It never ever becomes a job. Is that something that you would encourage people to do, or you don't think it's important with what you do in your education and teaching?
So it's one of the first things that we look at. In fact, when we do the C module, the concept module, we have a little framework that we begin with called the entrepreneur sweet spot. And we basically say that the three things that have to kind of come together when you're choosing a good concept is something that you're passionate about and that you feel a great sense of purpose for, and that it lines up with your background and your story, your origin story lines up with this thing. And then the next one is that you can add value in the space, and the next one is that you can charge money for it, or that there are people with budgets, people with money to spend, and it tends to be that you need all three. So, and the other thing I've noticed is that it's not necessarily at the extreme edge. So, at the extreme edge of what you can make money from is actually probably something you wouldn't be all that passionate to do. Maybe working in the corporate world, or maybe working alongside some people who've got lots of money but aren't necessarily the best people you want to work with. At the extreme edge of value, you might find yourself in the academic world, lecturing at university, but that's not really your passion. And then at the extreme edge of passion and purpose, you might find yourself either snowboarding, scuba diving, or working in a slum in India, because it's like deep passion, deep purpose kind of work. But often that is unpaid work, and it's not sustainable. So what we're trying to do is triangulate and balance this equation and say, okay, we're trying to balance something that you're feel a sense of passion and purpose for, that is also something that the world wants solved, that is also something people are willing to pay to have solved. And when we can kind of clump those three things together, we're onto a good topic for you.
And what would you say, I guess, I always talk to people about one of the best skills you can develop in sales or in anything is the ability to tell a story. Like with your, education and growth accelerator program, do you teach people how to position their story, whether it's, people join people want to work with people they like, trust, believe in, etc., etc., etc. Is that the type of skill, or what's two or three other skills that you would, really feel is important for someone that's taking the plunge to become an entrepreneur, or they are an entrepreneur and they want to take it to the next level?
So really developing your story and developing your personal brand is a strategy for accelerating kind of up into the six-figure mark. In the early days, it's important to have a story and to know it's important to know that you're on a path that you're going to stick with, which is one of the reasons behind passion and purpose, is because entrepreneurship is so hard and it takes so long to succeed that essentially if you don't have passion and purpose behind it, you're just not going to stay with it long enough. It tends to be that entrepreneurship requires you, in order for you to get a payoff, it's kind of like you have to go through the first 5 doubles pretty much unpaid, or not unpaid, but not highly rewarded. So if you think about, you start a business and you do 50 grand, then you do 100 grand, and then you do 200, and then 400, and then 800. Well, you're actually 5 doubles in, and you're only up to kind of 800, 1.6 million, something like that. But you're not necessarily kind of, blowing it out the water just yet. But if you then do the next 5 doubles and you go 3.2, 6.4, 12 million, 25 million, 50 million, you've just suddenly, okay, now you're on everyone's radar. You're a huge success. But the problem is that the level of passion, creativity, and energy required to kind of get those first 5 doubles done is very high, and it's very disproportionately unrewarded. And by the time you go into the next 5 doubles, most of the groundwork's done. You've surrounded yourself with some talented people. And actually, in many cases, it doesn't even require as much grueling heartache and effort to go the next 5 doubles as the first 5 doubles. And yet all the payoff is in the second 5 doubles. So it's really the passion and the purpose and all of that sort of stuff that is going to get you through those first 5 doubles. And it's also going to attract those talented, passionate people into the company who want more than just money out of work. So there's so many purposes for that. But in the early days, I don't recommend people spend an awful lot of time really pushing their story too much, but very much finding out the story of the customer. I'm much more focused on understanding the customer story at that point, understanding their pain points, their problems, understanding what they resonate with, what they're trying to solve in the world, what they're trying to get done. And there's this magical moment where you kind of hit $100,000 is a bit of a turning point per year, $10,000 a month worth of sales. And that's where you've got a real opportunity to accelerate away. And you've got the opportunity to very rapidly go from 100 to 500 to a million. And what tends to drive that is having a story and being a key person of influence and being known, but it sits on top of having the right commodity. Because I've also seen people who've got this great story and they're kind of well known and famous and they've done some incredible thing and they tell their story so well, but they haven't got the layer that sits underneath that makes the money. And therefore they constantly hit into a brick wall, which is that they tell their story, but it doesn't translate into anything that's scalable. So they got raving fans that don't know what to do. So that first layer is about understanding like almost the fundamentals of how the business works and how it makes money. When you see someone who can tell their story and that effortlessly turns into good business, that's the ultimate.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of things there, and you're in the growth accelerator, zone of that's your core business. I always talk to people a bit about, a 0 to 6-figure business to go from 6-figure to 7-figure and 7-figure. It requires skills. It requires growth. People have got to go and invest in themselves. What would you say to someone that is right now, they're at the 6-figure zone and they want to take their business to the 7-figure zone and above? What are some of the skills that they should really be looking at? They're probably employing more people now and moving out of technician phase into management phase, or, what are some of the important things you've seen over the time?
So there's a set of skills that we start with in life and in business, which I'd call functional skills. And the functional skills is like everything from, how to work a computer and all the software programs, right through to how to make a sales call, right through to, how to deliver value to a customer. If you're a photographer, a functional skill is working the camera and working the lights and setting up a set and all that sort of stuff. If you're a massage therapist, it's functional skills, getting your thumbs into someone's back and getting those knots out. So these are the functional skills that every industry has. And most people tend to start with a set of functional skills. At around the 6-figure mark, the biggest payoff is moving into a set of skills that I would call vital skills. And vital is a strange word. It means 2 things. There's 2 key definitions of vitality or vital, and it means that it's irreplaceable and it means that it's life force. So the irreplaceable life force of the business. And it's not about necessarily doing anything. It's about empowering things to happen. So it's this new set of skills where you're not the one who's functionally doing the work, but you're empowering it all to happen and you're leading it, you're guiding it. One of the most valuable things you can possibly do for your business is to be out there evangelizing the business, like literally out of the office, out there talking to people on podcasts, on videos, on stages, you know, talking to customers, talking to strategic joint venture partners, enrolling people into the vision of what you've got in the business. And it's an awkward role because no one, like, it's so foreign to so many people. This idea that you suddenly do this weird thing that's not functional, but it's highly valuable, but not functional. And it goes against everything you learned at school. It goes against everything you learned in the first 10 years of your career. And yet it's what's needed.
And you touched a little bit on vision. How important do you see, if like you're a company that wants to progress to 7 figures and beyond, how important do you see vision, mission, values, you know, in a business for its, you know, effectively its heartbeat or whatever you want to call it?
So at around 12 people, there's a big shift in dynamic that happens in a company. Right up until 12, certainly till 10, but sometimes till 12 people, the business behaves like a family, and everyone kind of just intuitively knows what everyone else is doing. And you just kind of have an awareness of what everyone's up to and what jobs people are doing and what everyone's working on. And you know exactly what every other person's role is. And if you imagine 12 people sitting around a dinner table, they're having kind of one fluid conversation between them. If someone says, "Can you pass the wine?" they don't have to like think very hard about who's going to pass it. They don't have to have a rule about who passes the wine or which wine do you mean. It's just very much, "Oh, can you pass me the wine?" And just immediately the wine gets passed across. Now, weirdly, if you go to 13, 14, 15 people, the conversation will break effortlessly into 3 or 4 different conversations. The people down that end of the table are having a conversation about politics. The people down this end of the table are talking about relationships. People in the middle of the table are talking about career. And suddenly it's like 3 radically different conversations because the table just broke into 3 parts. The same thing happens in a business. So the business basically at 13 people magically becomes too big to be small, and it's also too small to be big. So you're now in this really awkward phase where the business is just pulling in different directions. The other dynamic that happens is that you always have the first 5 employees who are rebels and misfits and who didn't have normal jobs, and they had time available, and they weren't so skilled and so amazing that they were being poached by Google. So you basically have your first 5 employees who are just rebels and misfits who are there at the beginning. The most recent 5 employees are probably people who have a master's degree and 15 years experience in the industry. And now you've basically got these people who feel entitled because they were there at the beginning, and these people who feel entitled because they're more qualified, and they just hate each other. They fight all the time. So coming back to your question, when you instill vision, mission, and values, what you're doing is creating an underlying conversation that unifies people. You're creating a reason for people to line up and get on the same page. You're at least pointing people in the right direction. You're saying, "Hey, look, here's where we want to be. This is what the most important thing in the company, the most important conversation," you know, like for my company, the most important conversation is that we develop entrepreneurs who stand out, scale up, and make positive impact in the world. That's the most important conversation. So when we talk about our vision, we say, the vision is we're going to be this organization that develops these entrepreneurs who are solving the world's most meaningful problems. And we're going to have tens of thousands of these globally who are out there picking a United Nations global goal and just smashing a little dent in that goal and solving a problem. And we're going to be the domino effect. We're going to be the first domino that gets 10,000 dominoes out there doing good stuff in the world. And they're going to become awesome businesses that are profitable and scalable, and they're going to be doing great things in the world. And that's the vision of what we're trying to create. So everyone kind of goes, okay, well, that's the most important vision, right? That's that entrepreneurs will solve meaningful problems. And then it's like, okay, well, what are our values around doing that? And I've said to our team, our values are to be brave, to have fun, to make a dent. So being brave is constantly being outside the comfort zone, never settling for anything less than improving, to push the boundaries, to take some risks. And I've basically given everyone in the company permission to be brave and saying that's what's expected of you. Your job is about being brave. Everyone, whether I don't care what that means in your role, but if you're not being brave in your job, you're not living out the culture. you've also got to have fun. Why bother doing this if it's going to be horrible and stressful and shit? So let's have some fun with it. And then the next one is we've got to make a dent ourselves. We've got to be doing stuff that improves the world. We've got to be doing stuff that is making a dent in the universe. So we talk about each person's role has to make an impact. Each person's role has to be, getting out there and solving problems. So by creating that culture, strong mission, strong vision, strong values, it's creating a level of alignment that allows us to get past that mythical 12-person barrier and to create a bigger conversation.
Yeah, and I guess you've done the book Key Person of Influence, but you've also done 2 or 3 other books, four books, I believe. And what type of areas are those books in terms of, are they follow-ons from Key Person of Influence, or are they in different areas? Like, what would you say there about?
The books follow the path. So the very first book is Entrepreneur Revolution, and it's about the trends as to why this is the most awesome time in history to be an entrepreneur. And it's all about how do you get started? How do you find a concept? Who do you put on the team to begin with, or what suppliers might you go looking for? What products would you launch? So it's kind of like launching. It's essentially focused on the entrepreneur mindset when you're starting from nothing. The next one is and creating something of value. Then the next one is about standing out as an influencer, called Key Person of Influence. And then essentially that takes you to the point where you're now recruiting a team and you're trying to get the engines firing. So the next book is oversubscribed, which is about running campaigns and promotions to really fire up the jets so you can afford to have a team. And then the final one is called 24 Assets. And essentially a business becomes a performance business. A big shift is when it goes from a P&L focus, a profit and loss focus, to a balance sheet focus, which is what is our underlying asset? What is it that we are awesome at? What is the thing that this business creates a value that's more permanent than the weekly P&L? And it's about formalizing the assets of the business. So I'm taking you through a journey where we're going and starting a business, standing out, scaling up, and then formalizing an asset, which will be the platform for growth.
And we are talking about business growth, challenges, adversities, and everything at the moment. We're probably, and this will timestamp the question, we're in a unprecedented time of uncertainty for many businesses, and one of your, I guess, probably core parts of your business is running events, which, and you're an international business, and a lot of your clients are probably, innovators and, game changers as well, and they're all managing their own budgets and cash flows, and et cetera, et cetera. How do you see this time? And people like yourself will always see opportunity in times of challenge. So, you're probably going to answer it with a very good, amazing answer. But, how do you see this current time? What do you see even moving forward? Like, how do you see, like, a lot of people are using words like, the world as we now see it. Like, what's your underlying view on that, and business, and even your own business?
About every 10 years, the world goes through a major disruption, and it's almost an existential transformation. And it's never, transformation's not pretty, right? It's transformation is messy business. And if you think about any form of transformation, whether it be fitness transformation or having a family or building a house, all transformation is a messy business. And there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, and there's a lot of stuff that can, there's a lot of mess before it gets better. But every 10 years, we have some form of major disruption. So 10 years ago, we had the global financial crisis. 10 years before that, we had 9/11, and we had the dot-com bubble crash. And then 1987, we had a global stock market meltdown, and we had the fall of the USSR, and, global order came to an end, with the Cold War. And you can go back through decade after decade after decade after decade, and roughly speaking, for a very long time, pretty much every 10 years, we end up with, some form of disruption. if you then add to that, that in your personal life, every 10 years, you're going to have some major disruption. So there's something that's going to derail you in your personal life. You're going to have a falling out with a friend. You're going to might have a divorce. You might have a health concern. You might have a loved one who's unwell. All sorts of things, right? Can happen. You could have an accident and become physically disabled. All sorts of things could happen, and something will happen every 10 years. So by and large, you're going to have a global disruption or a personal disruption about every 5 years. And you're just going to have to suck it up and say, that's life, right? And there is no reverse gear on time. World is just a transforming thing. My view is that, we are absolutely going into a very different world going forward. I'm an optimist. I believe that despite terrible things happening, we end up moving forward as a humanity. The global financial crisis was a massive financial crisis that happened to every country in the world, pretty much, other than like Australia. And yet, the 2010s was one of the most glorious decades in humanity. Throughout Asia, it went from 25% of people living on less than $2 a day to 9% of people living on less than $2 a day. The whole world got smart computers in their pocket. African farmers had the ability to forecast weather and to communicate with their peers and, to have bank accounts. All of these incredible things happened in the 2010s. There's also horrific things that happen in the 2010s as well, but that's the march of humanity, and transformation's messy. So I think I'm a bit off track here, but to me, COVID-19, it's cause for transformation. I was never in the events business. I was in the getting entrepreneurs to stand out, scale up, and do positive things in the world business. So actually, one of the biggest bottlenecks in our business was events. One of the worst things about our business was that we ran a lot of events. Now we're doing way more online. We're just opening up to 10 times bigger markets. We're talking to people all over the world. We're finding new and interesting people that we never would have come across had it not been for COVID-19. COVID-19 is like the new CEO of the company and super demanding, wanting transformation to happen in real time, and has put me to absolute shame as my ability as a leader. All the things that I thought were going to take 2 years, COVID-19 came in and demanded that they happened in a month or two, and mobilized action at a speed that I wasn't able to do in my wildest dreams.
And it's a really interesting point, because so many people, that's the optimist, that's the person that's been on a journey, that's the businessman, that's the person that can always look at the glass half full approach. But there's a lot of people that probably go, I'm out, I'm checkmated, I'm done, this is, so it's all about perspective a lot of the time. And there's always opportunity in downturns, and it's just a matter of how you innovate and how you adopt world best practice. And there are gyms that that in the fitness industry, they'll go, I was forced into doing stuff online, which I never wanted to do, and I was always prepared to just work harder, not smarter. Now I have to work smarter, and now I'm going to be able to implement smarter into my harder. That's the way I sort of see it.
And there are some people who they've ticked the box of owning a gym, and they've transformed so many fitness people's lives. And now there are other people who are doing that even better than they are, and they've lost the passion for it years ago. And COVID-19 basically highlighted that they're just not up for the innovation again, in which case go find something else that you're ready to innovate. It's okay for your journey to change. It's okay to have different interests, and to take your mountain of value forward into a different direction. That's all fine. And there's never been more money on the planet than ever before. There's never been more access to markets. There's never been more talented people who want to work on opportunities that have a variety of opportunities. There's never been more access to training and insight and research. So it's the greatest time around. It's the greatest time ever to be a human, and it's okay for things to change.
Just one sort of one of the last questions I want to ask you is around contribution, and I know that's important to you. How important, like, I always look at contribution and giving back as like the highest level of value you could really do and make an impact. What do you, how would you describe that?
So I believe that something about our human wiring is that we want to make the most of the times we're in. We want to make the most of our surroundings. Um, we want to make the most of any situation we find ourselves in. And there's two polarities. There's a polarity between self and others. So essentially, it's a difficult algorithm, because if you have £1 million in the bank, making the most of what you've got means finding a great way to deploy the £1 million. If you then suddenly do that well and you end up with £10 million in the bank, now you've got this new problem called make the most of what you've got, which means you've got to go and deploy £10 million. And then you find yourself with £100 million and you've got to figure out how to deploy that. So the game never ends. It's always called make the most of what you've got. But there's two polarities. You can either make the most for yourself and passion, or you can make the most for others' purpose, and that's contribution, giving back. And there's kind of these bands, and if you go too far this way, you discover that the juice is not worth the squeeze. Surrounding yourself with Ferraris and houses and boats and all the trappings of like personal gratification has diminishing returns, and you suddenly realize that actually none of that stuff's really making you all that happy. It does to a point, but then you go, actually, realistically, this isn't kind of bringing me joy. Likewise, giving everything you've got away and basically having hardship yourself because you're just giving everything away and you're giving it of yourself and you're never getting paid and you just give, you end up with resentment. You think, oh, here I am helping all these people and it's not coming back to me. If you go too far into altruism, where you're just altruistically just, doing this away. And then right smack bang in the middle, there's this very amazing intersection that you can find. And I feel like this is almost the best thing you can ever get out of life. And the best thing is where you find this perfect intersection where the thing that most makes you passionate and coming alive and that feels most rewarding personally is also something that adds a lot of value to others. And it's like, wow, it's like I could do this forever. It's like almost you find this magical point where your own personal needs are getting met and you're meeting the needs of others. And this is like this beautiful dance of all things being in balance. And you end up with energy, creativity, momentum. You get personally fulfilled, and also you get a lot of good stuff happening out there in the world as well. So the greatest point that I think you can find is where passion meets purpose.
Well said. And just to wrap up, do you have a favorite book that you think that the audience, apart from your own, that the audience could get really good value out of?
I'm going to answer that in a funny way, or I'm going to be a bit cheeky with this. I really believe that the book that changes your life the most is not one you read, it's one you write. And I would encourage anyone listening I would say this, for most people listening, you've read enough books, it's time to write one. And something magical happens when you write a book. And basically it's an acknowledgement of your own value. It's unpacking your head and actually moving things around so that you've got room for more ideas to come in. It's a scalable format that allows other people to learn about who you are and what your story is. And there comes a point where you read so many books that essentially all you're doing is highbrow entertainment, and you're not learning really much new from the books. You're just kind of consuming them on autopilot, on habit. And it's just like consuming anything. You kid yourself that you're doing this great thing because you're reading a new book every month on personal growth and development, but actually you've hit the diminishing returns. And the thing that would be more powerful would be to create something. So the book that changes your life the most, and I really want to like kind of shock people into action with this, is to say, stop reading, start writing. Like, don't read my books, go write your own book, right? Go go and the book that changed my life the most was the ones that I wrote. They radically changed my life, and I still get royalty checks.
Like I can totally relate to that right now. Like I'm talking to you as someone that I've, admired as an entrepreneur. But I've interviewed, 50 incredible, and I've only just started, 5 months ago, amazing entrepreneurs around the world. Like I was talking earlier to a lady, she's, got a foundation in Cambodia and blah, blah, blah. She's been on every 60 Minutes, you name it. But it all started because I manifested my vision of something that, an event that happened to me. I decided to write the book and bring that to life. And then, I start waking up in the middle of the night, not stressed, in an excitable way. And I was like, just going, I've got to bring this to life. And then podcast comes out, now.
The amazing thing, Craig, is that the amount of time that it's taken to record this podcast, some people, the amount of time that it takes to listen to a podcast, you could create one. And you've gotten so much value out of the creation of a podcast, and the joy for your listeners is going to be inspired by your example, where they go, actually, you know what, I'm going to start creating more. I'm going to create more books, create more podcasts, create more videos, as opposed to just always being on the consumption of that.
That's really amazing advice. The first person that said that out of all 50 odd entrepreneurs to date. The best piece of advice?
The best piece of advice that
you've received.
Yeah, the best piece of advice there was a piece of advice that I got at a particular moment in time that was very valuable, which was income follows assets. And I know that's such a really weird thing. It's like, it hit me right at the right time. And it was basically what he was talking about was, he was saying that up until that point, I'd only ever brokered other people's value. I'd only ever been the person out there marketing and selling other people's value. And he said, Daniel, the reason you just got so hit by the last recession is because you didn't have the underlying asset. You didn't have your value formalized. And he said, income follows assets. If you want more income, develop more assets. And don't worry about the income, just create more assets. And that sent me on a very different path. Up until that point, I was a sales and marketing focused person. And then after that point, I'm very focused on innovation and developing assets and really spotting the hidden assets in things. And that was it was almost a real shift in direction. But income follows assets. I know it's kind of a crude way of saying it, but it's like, rather than focusing on the thing that you get, focus on the thing of value.
No, that's really good advice. So where do we find more out from you? Lots of people around the world already know who you are, but where do we find websites, courses, social media?
Built a rod for my own back, haven't I? Because I can't really say go get my books on Amazon. Because I've just told everyone, don't buy my books, go and write one. So you're not allowed to buy Key Person of Influence. You're not allowed to buy Oversubscribed or 24 Assets or Entrepreneur Revolution. You must definitely stay away from all four of those great books. You can follow me on social media, and we run accelerator programs. They're invitation only. We typically have 3,000 people fill in scorecards for every 60 people that we bring onto the program. So fill in if you want to, you can fill in the Key Person of Influence scorecard. It gives you a lot of value to start with. However, we're a little bit different in the way that we operate, in the sense that we're massively oversubscribed at most times. And we're really looking for a particular type of person who fits our community well, and who's up to something really big. And then that's kind of, who we work with. So there's nothing really I'm trying to sell, but feel free to read the books, feel free to connect with us, do a scorecard, follow the social media accounts, all of that sort of stuff, and we'll go on the journey together.
And from me, I really appreciate you taking the time to, to connect and do an interview with me. As I said, I admire everything that you've done in business, and you've got a good following. You produce amazing content, and you are out there making it happen. So really appreciate you jumping on to the One Shot Movement podcast.
Thanks, Craig. I really love it. I love what you're building.
Beautiful. You've got one shot, so take it. You live one life, embrace it. Don't let fear tie you down, it'll mess you around. You've got one shot.